Chapter 1: The Life and Times of the Simpsons. The creation myth. According to legend, according to the press, according more or less the word of its creator, The Simpsons was born in a single fevered moment. They say it happened like this. It was early 1987. Matt Groening, a 33-year-old underground cartoonist, was sitting outside the office of James L. Brooks, an acclaimed Hollywood producer. Brooks had been a titan of network television in the 1970s, executive producer of The Mary Tyler Moore Show, Lou Grant, and Taxi, among others. And more recently, was the celebrated creator of the feature film Terms of Endearment, for which he won 3 Oscars as producer, director, and writer. At the moment, he was the executive producer of a quirky variety show called The Tracy Ullman Show, set to air soon on the infant Fox network. Brooks had called Groening in for a meeting, which was to start in 15 minutes. They were to discuss turning Groening's acclaimed comic strip Life in Hell into a series of animated vignettes to fill space between the Ullman Show's live skits. Groening and Brooks had met once before, a year earlier, at the urging of Brooks' producing partner, Polly Platt, who was a fan of Life in Hell. That time they talked about turning the comic strip into a full-blown feature film. Nothing had come of it, but here Groening was, back again in the antechamber of big-time Hollywood, being offered another chance to bring his work to TV. Maybe Groening was thinking, as he waited, about the years of menial labor that had marked his decade-long tenure in Los Angeles to that point. Work as a chauffeur, as a clerk at a punk record store, as a circulation manager for the LA Weekly, schlepping stacks of newspapers around the city in a beat-up Dodge Dart. Perhaps he was thinking about the characters that populated his Life in Hell strip. A misanthropic, one-eared bunny named Binky, a dysfunctional duo in matching fezzies called Akbar and Jeff. The strip rarely had much in the way of setups or punchlines. It had no side gags and didn't even have much movement. Sometimes nothing more than the heads of Akbar and Jeff in identical poses in panel after panel. Instead, it was long on wordplay and social commentary, chock full of marketing parodies and philosophical musings. How could this world possibly be brought to 24 frames per second live? The strip had seen some success by this point. A book called Love is Hell had sold 20,000 copies in the Christmas rush of 1984, and the strip had been syndicated nationally to several dozen alternative newspapers. But this was network TV, the marketing muscle of a giant media conglomerate, an audience of millions, another realm entirely. How could Groening persuade Brooks that these static, simple black and white drawings were the blueprint for a cartoon? And then, so the story goes, Groening came to a sudden and disturbing realization. If he walked through the doors of Brooks' office and pitched his Life in Hell cartoons, and woohoo, Brooks bought it, he'd lose the rights to all the characters he'd created and spent years drawing. They'd become the property of Fox, of some mammoth multinational corporate entity called News Corp. So Groening, a graduate of free-spirited Evergreen State College in deeply countercultural Olympia, Washington, a 10-year veteran of the anti-corporate alternative press, decided in an instant to save his creative soul. He wouldn't offer Life in Hell to Fox. he would come up with something else right then and there. In the minutes remaining until his meeting, Groening dashed off the rough sketches of a new idea. A series of shorts about a hideously dysfunctional family, a sort of anti-sitcom, starring an offish father, a harried mom, three bratty kids. Racing against the clock, he gave them a good old generic American surname, Simpson, and then assigned them first names stolen from his own family. The father was Homer, after Groening's own dad. The mother was Marge, from his mom's Margaret. The daughters, like his own sisters, were Lisa, a second grader, and Maggie, a pacifier chomping infant. The nastiest kid of all would be 10-year-old Bart, an anagram of Brett. Brooks bought it. On the 19th of April 1987, right after the first skit in the third episode of the Tracy Ullman Show, North America's TV screens, the relatively few in those days that were tuned to Fox anyway, filled with the world's first glimpse of The Simpsons. In that opening segment, Homer enters Bart's bedroom to tuck him in. Bart asks a philosophical question, and Homer replies with a glib dismissal. It's a 24-second scene. Later in the show, another 15 seconds, Marge tucks in Lisa, who's seized by dread at her mother's mention of bedbugs. Then there are 33 seconds of Marge singing the timeless lullaby, "Rockabye Baby," to Maggie. And then 33 seconds more as all three Simpson kids, each of them accidentally freaked out by their parents' bedtime talk of bedbugs and falling cradles, come storming into their parents' room and pile into Homer and Marge's bed. Elapsed time 1 minute 45 seconds. This was episode 1, episode MG01. Good night. This was how The Simpsons introduced itself to the world. The drawing and animation were blatantly crude, thick-lined, and primarily colored. At best, the rough draft of a big-time network cartoon. It was so primitively drawn, it might as well have been lifted directly from the rough sketches Groening had scribbled to show to Brooks. The characters were as two-dimensional as the drawings, the vignettes far too short for anything as sophisticated as character development. The central gag, kids find ironic horror in bedtime platitudes, was as simplistic as the animation. All of which is to say that it's extremely likely that no one watching, from the folks at home to Groening and Brooks themselves, knew they witnessed the debut of the longest running cartoon in the history of American television. The first baby steps of an institution that would become one of the most watched TV shows on earth and the most influential cultural enterprise of its time. The embryonic Simpsons chugged along unassumingly for the next 2 years. Every week, the Tracy Ullman Show would be interspersed with 4 quick snapshots of this vulgar family, each of them 20 or 30 seconds in length, together comprising a simple story arc, 4-part mini-fables, animated analogues to the 4-paneled comic strips that had populated newspapers around the world for a century. They had a premise, a setup, a payoff, and not much else. The Simpson kids engaged in a burping contest, only to be upstaged by their gluttonous father. Bart and his dad play catch in the backyard, precipitating a series of violent accidents. The whole family visits the zoo, where they are revealed to bear numerous similarities to the monkeys. In Ullman's third season, these glimpses stretch into a sustained scene of a minute or so, but the animation remained extremely lo-fi, and the gags continued to clang in a series of single notes. In one third season short, Bart and Lisa join the studio audience of their favorite TV show, a banal kids series starring an ill-tempered clown named Krusty, and Bart picks a fight with its star. In another, the whole family enrolls in group therapy and quickly finds a remedy for its chronic dysfunction as it unites in its hatred of the therapist, and so on. Overall, the Almond Show aired 48 of these short cartoons, 48 slices of Simpson family life, 48 mild variations on a somewhat unorthodox but ultimately rudimentary theme, namely that the American family in the late 20th century was loutish and vulgar, a slow burn nightmare. Groening's TV debut attracted profiles by mainstream newspapers like the Washington Post and Newsday, although it should be noted that both gave Life in Hell higher billing than his odd little almond shorts. Indeed, so insignificant did this silly cartoon seem that when the BBC brought the Tracy Ullman Show to British television, it edited the Simpsons cartoons out. Yet, something exceptional was happening here. It was a time when North American TV screens were dominated by saccharine family sitcoms like The Cosby Show and Family Ties, or nostalgic one-liner fest like Cheers. Movie screens were filled with big-budget studio drag, and pop charts were dominated by bands better known for their skilled use of hairspray and makeup than for their music. Rough and crude could seem, in this context, like reasonable facsimiles of bracing and honest. At the very least, the Simpsons shorts offered a quick peek into a nasty world where stories didn't inevitably have morals, and father empathetically did not know best. Clearly, someone at the Fox network saw some potential. The third season of the Tracy Ullman Show between 1988 and 89 featured the longest Simpsons shorts yet, upgraded from bumpers to full-blown features on equal footing with the live-action skits. There was even a two-parter called Maggie in Peril that clocked in at more than 2 minutes and sprawled in its miniature way over 2 episodes of Almond. There was talk of a half-hour Christmas special, further talk of turning these Simpsons characters into the stars of a full-blown series. The Simpsons as we know it was about to emerge from the womb.